All right, mates, welcome back. JL Scott Fishing and Eats. We're going to talk Swimbait mods. Swimbait Modifications had a follower, subscriber, asked me to go over how I rigged a swim bait. I got 12.43 pounds on the Tidal Potomac off of 3 fish with this swim bait, okay? And so they asked me how did I actually rig it. And so I'm going to walk you through. This is by no means the only way, the perfect way. This is just how I rig Line-Thru swim baits for me, okay, and what I do and where I live, because I either fish the upper Potomac a lot of times, which is smallies, and then Tidal Potomac, which is obviously largemouth, right? And so I have to change the modification just a little bit by changing the size of the treble hook, changing the size of the actual swim bait a lot of times, and different mods like that. But the principle is basically the same. Okay, whether you're fishing for smallmouth, you want to go, obviously I'm going to a smaller paddle tail swim bait, okay? Then when I usually tend to go down in the tidal or places like Lake Anna, bigger impoundments that have shad and have herring, I go to the larger swim bait, okay? Which obviously requires a little bit more in the size of a treble. For example, you're going to go with a bigger treble hook, okay? Than you would, say, as you downsize, you're going to downsize your treble as you downsize the size of your swim bait. At least that's what I do. Others may do other things. You also can add a mod that allows you to add, after you rig your Line-Thru and your treble and you're set, you actually can add, again, another modification to the bigger size, typically the bigger size, okay, swim bait for a different action. And what I mean by action, mates, is understand 2 points. One, if you're a you're fishing behind someone pretty much all day long, correct? So you want to fish different, okay? And so you want to add a little bit of something that's different, especially if your boater is not landing fish. It may just be a slight change to whatever he's doing in order to get strikes, okay? Now for kayak anglers, okay, especially tournament kayak anglers, because I've seen this time and time again, and I've talked to enough tournament anglers, and I've just seen this myself out on the water behind people, okay? Because there's so many areas that are predominantly honey holes and predominantly go-to spots that everybody knows on the Susquehanna, on the upper Potomac, and a lot of times there's a lot of other people in the area. And what you want to look for when you get out there is look in front of you, the boat in front of you. 9 times out of 10, they're throwing a chatterbait or a spinnerbait. And you can tell based simply on the blades, right? Coming off of the rod, heading out, its trajectory. If you're behind that, you know what I'm talking about. You can see it. When people are throwing power fishing and they're throwing any kinds of baits with a lot of blades, you can see those blades, reflections, all that stuff, right? If they're not getting bites, that's when you want to go to a swim bait, okay? A subtler presentation with a little flash. You can add a smaller blade. It's just a little different presentation. There's a reason why those fish are not biting that loud shatter, okay? Or that really flashy double-bladed spinnerbait, okay? And again, you can nuance that and, like, for example, match that coloration pattern, okay, to, say, Susquehanna. I see this happen on the Susquehanna all the time. A guy goes down, he burns a chatterbait, burns a friggin' whopper plopper. You're coming in behind him and you're catching 2, 3, 4 fish, and he's turning around looking at you, wondering what the hell just happened because he just fished that stretch. Well, he burned it and kept moving on, okay? Little slower presentations, swim baits, paddle tail swim baits, change it up, Line-Thru, or do that, okay? Now, on the Line-Thru, I'm going to change this up a little bit so you can kind of see what I'm talking about, okay? I'm going to go with the smallie variation, okay? But when I say that, trust me when I tell you that it's the size bait fish that matters in your fishery at the time of the year in which you're fishing it. So when I say smallie, this is a year-round presentation for me on rivers that I fish for smallmouth, whether it be Upper Potomac, Shenandoah, Allegheny, Susquehanna, just because the bait fish don't tend to be as big as, say, tidal fisheries, where you'll find shad, river herring, okay, as opposed to necessarily the more minnow and shiner and all that you will find in your interior non-tidal river watersheds, okay? Could be different in your area. Again, this just works for me. So when you grab that swim bait, all right, and you kind of see here, I'll roll the camera up a little bit, you can kind of see, I'll lower it down, what we're looking at here, okay? These are a whole bunch of different swim baits. All right, so you got your big size swim bait, obviously has your slot, okay, which makes it even better for when you hook that treble up in there. Obviously you want to go with a bigger treble to match the size of that particular swim bait, right? Kind of match that up. You can set that right up in there, okay? Perfect. Now your smaller. Oftentimes your smaller paddle tails are not going to have your hook slot, okay? They're not going to have that. So you're going to do some measuring a little bit, modifications in terms of how far you want to go, get a good idea of all that stuff. Now, it is important to note, mates, that when you're dealing with these swim baits, if you're buying swim baits off the shelf, you do not really know what kind of plastisol was used in the baits. If you're using a custom swim bait, I can almost guarantee you they're using the Swimbait Plastisol, which is a lot more durable, okay, than typical worm Plastisol that you would get, okay? So they last a lot longer is what I'm trying to stress here. As opposed to if you're buying paddle tails off the shelf and after 2 or 3, they're ripping, they're pulling, because that can happen. The whole point of the Line-Thru is also to save you in terms of your swim baits, right? So they're not ripping and tearing all the time, because the actual swim bait will move up your line as the hook stays in the bass's mouth. Again, not only going for that. If you're going for largemouth bass, you may also, depending on your preference, may want to go to a larger size, not necessarily this one, but a larger size treble hook for the smaller paddle tail swim baits. You certainly can do that. I like to prefer these two sizes for smallmouth. All right. And so that's pretty much, I don't go any higher for this when I'm fishing for smallmouth. I like to keep it, helps me on the river. And plus with their mouths, it just works for me a lot better than the big ones. So you've got your swim bait here, right? Okay. You're going to make an incision between the eyes, behind the nose, into that swim bait, okay? So you want to get something that's sharp, kind of a narrow, because you're going through plastic. You don't want it to be too wide, because if it's too wide and you make it wider than your cylinder that you're going to place into the swim bait, you're going to have problems, okay? So you're going to come in through here and you're going to punch through, okay? And you're going to work. Now, if you notice, this is wider than that needle point, right? Which is what I like, okay? Because it gives it a little bit of depth, okay? So I've come all the way through. You can see that on the bottom, right? Okay, so now we'll pull that out. Actually let it sit in there for about a minute or so. And then I'm going to pull that out, all right? Now, most of you are familiar with a lot of baits that come, specifically jigs, that will come with a guard on the hook. See that right there? That cylinder is what I use most of the time for my Line-Thrus. It's the perfect size diameter to fit inside a swim bait, and then I don't have to go out and buy any other cylinders, okay, to run my Line-Thru. It's perfect. It's flexible, okay? It's perfect. All right, so I'm going to put that onto this that I just ran through. Okay, sitting right there. I'm going to grab my swim bait again. I'm going to find that hole that I just formed, and I'm going to push that down. Okay, don't want to go all the way just yet, all right? Because I want to be able to put my line through there, right? So I got it. It's about 3/4 of the way through. See it through the translucent? You can see that in there? It's about 3/4 of the way through. Now, I'm going to take my line. Now, one thing you can do that I know some mates do is they will heat this a little bit, okay? After this gets tucked down, they'll heat this up a little bit so the plastic goes on. Now, you're not going to be taking out that, that cylinder when you do that, because a lot of times that heat is going to cause the plastic to really congeal to that cylinder, okay? You also can put that cylinder hot in there, okay? You can get it hot and slide it in there, and then as it cools down, that plastic will adhere to it. There's just different ways you can do that, okay? So I got my line in like that, and now I'm going to push it down a little bit deeper, okay? To where it comes out again. And there's my line coming through. See that? There's the line coming through. So you got your line coming through. This part is where you're going to put on your treble, okay? This is obviously going to your rod, right? Going to your reel, okay? And you've got that straight up. Now, what's going to happen is, let me just do a little bit of tie right here to speed this up a little bit. And once you get it on, there the way you want it on there, okay? Like in terms of, there are different placements that you can put inside this presentation, okay? So you got your treble on, you're going to trim that off, obviously, and you're going to load that up, okay? Now, depending on your treble brand, you may have an offset parallel to your eye hole, and then you're going to stick it straight in, okay? And you're going to run it just like that, all right? Leave 2 trucks deposed out, one on the inside. You certainly can get it closer if you want to go more. But this tends to be a lot more weedless than you would think in terms of that presentation. And what normally happens is they're going to hit this. This is going to come out, and then this is going to run up your line, okay? And when you grab that fish out of the water, this is what you're grabbing, obviously, and this is dangling up, and then you can go redo, okay? And so reload, retool, but you certainly can change the size swim baits to match your size swim bait, okay? For sure, depending on what size you want to do. I mean, you certainly can do the other, that's the line-through technique that I use predominantly 90% of the time. You can also do, obviously, the jig, single hook, for the larger size. That obviously works. But it's just a simple technique that you can use, mates, to attract bites, okay? Especially when you've noticed and you've recognized they're not biting the chatterbait, they're not biting the spinnerbait, okay? Rising water, typically a spinnerbait is a go-to bait around here in our region. But if it's just not happening, it may just be just a subtle difference, okay, in the vibration, the sound, the profile, that often will trigger those bites. So it's very simple. Again, tools are just a cylinder piece that's going to allow you to put a straight line into that bait. You can use a skewer. Use a skewer. Use a skewer for the bigger, for the larger size swim baits, like 5.5s or bigger to 7. Now for the bigger size swim baits, okay, If you don't have the jig head guard, okay, hook guard, and you've got to use the cylinders that you're buying, in the bag. I think they come 25 count. They could even come 100 count. If you're buying those and you're going to use those for your Line-Thru, okay, you want to use a little bit more. Actually, use a thermometer, okay, because it's a cylinder piece and you can see it on here, okay. Take that off. It's just a thermometer, okay, but it's got that point at the end, right? You can use that in the larger size swim baits, okay? And what I like about that is it also allows you to take that piece, okay, run it on there, and then run it straight down, okay, at whatever angle you want. Now, the larger ones, I've never used them with the small ones, because usually I'm fishing this size in a little bit shallower water. I did it at Murray. This is basically like a herring, okay? Blueback herring pattern. Okay, that's what I like to do. Smaller size, bigger size. Places like Murray, places like Anna, Hunting Run in Virginia, places like that. I'll go to a bigger size, open water, deeper water kind of thing, and I'll use nail weight. So you can put a nail weight in, add a little bit more. That bigger cylinder, bigger treble hook gives a lot more weight for casting efficiency as well. Okay, so there are any number of things that you can do. This is not the only way that you can do a Line-Thru. Other people, I am sure, have any number of different ways that they like to do it. It's just my comfort zone. This is what works for me, continually works for me, whether I'm fishing for smallie or I'm fishing for largemouth. Do not sleep, okay, on your treble. Okay, use a sharp, use a better, higher grade brand of treble hooks, mates, on these baits. Okay, because you're relying on them. All right, and you're predominantly only using one of them. So as opposed to your crankbait that's got two, and so you want to be able to get that hook set and get that hook up. But that's basically it. That's an easy presentation that you can be using right now, heading into spawn, pre-spawn, into spawn. Even I use it year-round, okay? Have caught fish year-round, okay, on a Line-Thru swim bait now. And I used to only use the Line-Thru swim bait in impoundments and reservoirs. I never really used it in river systems until the last 2 years. In the last 2 years, I really started to get a lot more comfortable with, having confidence in throwing them in shallow, 3 feet water or less river systems and getting strikes, especially for smallmouth. What I have found also is the standard Line-Thru swim bait, for me, has not gotten walleye strikes, okay, on the upper Potomac, like a Dam 4, for example. But if you modify it with the treble and the underspin, okay, use a screw lock, you can put that in, you get walleye bites. So that tells you there's a preference there between species of what they like, okay? And really it's the same day. Throwing one a couple times, not getting any bites, changing it up, adding the underspin, throwing it out there, first cast, getting a walleye. Right? Same spot, same area, same depth, just a little subtle different presentation. And that's what you want to focus on. So keep in mind what other people are throwing. I always pay attention to that whenever I'm out on the water. And when you're a co, you've got to pay attention to what your boater is throwing, okay? Because he's in the right position for what he's doing, right? You get what's left. So sometimes throwing off, away, back towards the bank, if you're fishing shallow, within a little subtle or different action, you will find that you will get as many, or even at times, more bites, okay, than your boater. Because you're already paying attention to what he's doing, And if it's not working and he's still doing it, you don't want to throw the same thing he's throwing. First of all, you probably wouldn't be able to. If he's flipping, you're probably not going to be able to, right? So you want to throw something else, okay? And this is just a great, easy swim bait opportunity, either with a jig head or a Line-Thru, that you can use to fish different. And that's what I like to do. I like to fish different. I don't fish like everybody else. I don't like to fish like everybody else. I always like to try new things when I'm out on the water to kind of see, to go try to see if things are true, or create a counter narrative to things that we think are true, but they're really not. And the only reason they are true in reality is because everybody's doing it. And so that's why everybody's catching fish. So I like to fish different. So I hope this helped you out. Please like and subscribe to the channel. I'll do a couple more fish hacks and fish tips on a couple of the other big catches from the late fall and early, in winter fishing season to hopefully help some folks out. And then we'll do the breakdowns. Okay, the breakdowns are coming for the Tidal Potomac. I will break down every section of the Tidal Potomac that I've fished over the last 25, 30 years. We'll show you where to fish and what baits that have been successful for me on the Tidal Potomac to help people out during the pre-spawn, into the spawn, before we get to summer. All right, mates. Appreciate it.